has been your personal journey, or probably paraphrasing that question, how did you harbor this interest or inclination towards the domain of space sciences and technology?
Right. So I was always interested in space, but I never thought I was smart enough. And I would like to encourage everyone who thinks like that to leave that thought and just go and try. Um, because once I got the courage and I started studying astronomy and planetary science, it turned out that I was smart enough. And as I had a journalism degree already, I started writing about space and all the conferences that I attended because I think there are important conversations at these conferences that are not communicated to the general public. And that's what I wanted to do. Instead, I ended up working for several space magazines, which again are very specialized. So the general public still doesn't know a lot about the problems and the challenges of space and why it is important to go to space. And that's another thing that would be important to teach people, educate people about the importance of space, because they think that space companies and governments spend way too much money on space rather than focusing on sustainability on Earth and other things. Actually, climate change is monitored from space. So, space has a lot of qualities that we could harness here on Earth, and people don't realize that. But anyway, I digress. And once I started attending these space conferences and started meeting and talking to astronauts, that's when I became interested in what happens to humans in space and what would happen to us if we colonized another planet, um, how our genes might change, what would happen to the brain, and that's how I ended up in this line of studies. But yeah, so this is another important thing that I want to emphasize, that educating the general public would be important. Just as we had David Attenborough for Earth to talk about animals and sustainability and the oceans and how polluted they are, it would be important for people to understand that the challenges of space make humans come up with technologies that we never thought of before because we didn't have those challenges. And they make life easier on Earth. And there are a lot of things going on the ISS, for example, a lot of research that would help our lives in the future. Um, yeah,
I really agree to that. Science communication really helps bridge the discrepancy between the people who are very well versed in the scientific language and terminology and the general masses,
sure.
and becomes even more significant to not let that divide grow greater
Yeah,
and greater.
yeah,
What,
definitely.
according to you, is the most significant thing in order to make sure that people in this domain, science of science communication, are able to properly convey the ideas of the scientific community to the general masses without oversimplifying that? Because that often is the
Hmm.
greatest bit that you can fall into, like while you're conveying these complex mathematical and uh, really complex ideas and theories, it's important to explain it to the wide public without leaving behind the nuances and intricacies of it. So how
Sure.
does one manage that perfect balance?
See, what I've seen in the industry is that engineers, however great they are in what they do, are not necessarily the right people to communicate what they're doing and how significant their work is. So we need more professionals, science communicators, who are familiar with space so they understand what's happening, and they can also communicate it. So we don't just need journalists who write about space, we need journalists who understand space and science so that they can publish articles and, broadcast um, things that are like in the middle ground. So they're scientific. If you want to look deeper into it, you can, and it's not like written for children only. That's important too, um, but not to oversimplify it. I agree, um, because people can look things up. Like if they read an article, and obviously things are explained in that, but something catches their eye, they should be able to look things up and research for themselves and understand. So we need more people who work for these companies and governments, and we need the companies and governments to understand they need these people, because that's one thing that they don't do right. Many companies don't think that communicating what they do to the general public is important. They just focus on their clients, and that's not right. It would be important for um, everyone to understand what they're doing, because they would get more support from the government and the public for their work.